You are the most wretched family I have ever seen.
Husband mocked and calls wife and her parents wretched in a gathering, but... Esteemed viewers, welcome to Luxurious True Life Stories. Please like and subscribe for more captivating luxury true stories. Let's get into the story. Pascal Raymond was one of the wealthiest men in the country, yet he lived in a modest apartment with his daughter, Daniela. No guards, no luxury cars, no designer labels, just a quiet, simple life. He owned Raymond Global Logistics, a powerful company known worldwide, but no one inside the firm had ever seen its true CEO. Pascal preferred anonymity. He believed money revealed character, and he wanted to observe people without the distortion of wealth. Daniela shared her father's philosophy. Intelligent and observant, she rejected privilege and insisted on living like everyone else. She worked small jobs, used public transport, and dressed simply. While many heirs flaunted inheritance, Daniela wanted love, respect, and friendship built without influence. Pascal allowed it, though he monitored everything carefully through his trusted assistant, Margaret Hale. Father and daughter had one quiet agreement: they would never reveal their true identity unless necessary. They would test the world first. What neither of them knew was that someone ambitious, insecure, and dangerously prideful was about to enter their lives, and that choice would change everything. Daniela Raymond moved through the city like someone determined to remain unnoticed. She worked part-time at a small bookstore, not because she needed the money, but because she enjoyed watching people, how they spoke, what they valued, and how they treated others when no advantage could be gained. Her calm nature drew people in, yet she kept her personal life guarded. Wealth had shown her one painful truth while growing up: admiration often followed money, not character. She wanted something real. One rainy evening, while closing the bookstore, she noticed a man struggling outside beneath the weak shelter of the storefront. His shoes were worn, his coat slightly faded, but his posture carried stubborn dignity. When a strong gust scattered a stack of delivery papers into the street, Daniela rushed to help gather them before the rain destroyed everything. The man thanked her, slightly embarrassed but composed. "My name is Solomon Barnes," he said. There was determination in his voice, the kind born from years of fighting to rise above difficult beginnings. Solomon worked temporary jobs while chasing stability, refusing to accept the poverty he had been raised in. Daniela sensed both ambition and vulnerability in him, and something about that combination intrigued her. The conversation was brief, yet unusually easy. No pretense. No posturing. Just two strangers talking while rain tapped steadily against the pavement. As Solomon walked away, he glanced back once, as if committing her face to memory. For the first time in a long while, Daniela felt the quiet stir of possibility. After that rainy evening, Solomon began stopping by the bookstore more often. Sometimes he bought nothing, pretending to browse while stealing brief conversations with Daniela. He spoke openly about his childhood, cramped apartments, unpaid bills, and a promise he made to himself never to live powerless again. His hunger for success was unmistakable, yet he wrapped it in charm that made his ambition seem admirable rather than intimidating. Daniela admired his persistence. Unlike many people she had observed, Solomon carried no laziness in him. He worked multiple short-term jobs, studied business at night, and spoke constantly about building a future that commanded respect. What she saw was resilience. What she did not yet see was the quiet fear driving him, the terror of ever appearing small again. Weeks turned into months, and their bond deepened through simple routines: shared coffee from street vendors, long walks through crowded evening markets, and conversations about dreams. Solomon often spoke about the kind of life he wanted: a large home, recognition, influence. Daniela listened gently, never revealing that everything he desired already belonged to her world. One evening, After a long silence between them, Solomon admitted something softly. "I don't want a life where people look down on me." Daniela met his gaze with calm sincerity. "Then build one with someone who never will." In that moment, admiration shifted into love, quiet, steady, and full of promise. Neither realized that hidden truths were already shaping the foundation beneath their relationship. As Solomon's visits became consistent, Daniela began noticing the strain behind his determination. He worked tirelessly, yet opportunity seemed to slip past him. Interviews ended with polite rejections. Promises dissolved without explanation. Each setback tightened something inside him, though he masked it with optimism when he stood beside her. One evening, after listening to him speak about wanting one real chance, Daniela made a decision. She approached her father calmly at dinner. Pascal listened without interruption as she explained Solomon's ambition, his discipline, and his potential. She did not exaggerate his virtues nor hide his flaws. She simply said she believed in him. Pascal studied her quietly. He trusted his daughter's judgment, but he trusted human nature even more. After a long pause, he agreed, on one condition: Solomon would never know who truly opened the door for him. If he earned advancement, it would be through performance alone. Daniela accepted immediately. Within a week, Solomon received an unexpected offer from Raymond Global Logistics. It was an entry-level operations role, modest but stable. Supervisors quickly noticed his drive. Within months, his name circulated among managers as one to watch. The recognition fed something deep inside him, a growing belief that he was finally stepping into the life he deserved. Each small success strengthened his confidence, and with it came a subtle shift in how he carried himself. Daniela saw the change, but interpreted it as healthy progress. Outside of work, their relationship blossomed through quiet, meaningful moments. They cooked simple meals together, laughed over failed recipes, and spent long evenings discussing the future. Solomon often spoke about building a powerful life from nothing, promising Daniela she would never struggle beside him. She never corrected his assumption that she understood hardship in the same way he did. Instead, she admired his protective nature, believing it came from love rather than pride. To Solomon, Daniela represented emotional safety, someone gentle, supportive, and uncomplicated. He loved that she demanded nothing from him except honesty and presence. Yet beneath his affection lay an unspoken calculation. Solomon believed he was marrying a woman with no status, no influential family, and no financial advantage, someone who would depend on him as he rose. The idea comforted him more than he realized. Control, to him, felt like security. Meanwhile, Daniela loved without strategy, convinced that authenticity was the strongest foundation for marriage. Neither understood that their relationship was quietly built on illusion. She hid her power to protect sincerity, while he embraced her simplicity to protect his ego. What felt like perfect alignment was, in truth, two very different expectations moving toward the same future. Solomon proposed on a quiet evening in a small city park, far from expensive restaurants or grand gestures. His voice carried emotion rather than performance as he promised Daniela a future shaped by hard work and shared dreams. She accepted without hesitation, drawn not to the proposal itself but to the life they believed they were building together. Pascal attended the modest ceremony weeks later, dressed like any proud father, offering a firm handshake instead of revealing the immense power he held. To Solomon, his new father-in-law appeared polite but unimpressive, a reserved older man with no visible influence. Their wedding reflected Daniela's preference for sincerity over spectacle. Close friends gathered, laughter replaced luxury, and handwritten vows carried more weight than decorations ever could. Solomon felt proud standing at the altar, convinced he was the stronger pillar in the marriage, the one destined to elevate their household into prominence. When Pascal quietly gifted them a small house, Solomon accepted it as a generous but ordinary gesture, never questioning how effortlessly it had been arranged. Marriage began peacefully. Mornings were soft, evenings predictable, and their home filled with the comfort of routine. Yet as Solomon settled into professional stability, something subtle awakened inside him, a sharper awareness of status. He started comparing his life to that of rising colleagues, noticing their sophisticated spouses and socially impressive families. Though he never voiced it directly, a quiet dissatisfaction took root. Daniela, content with their simplicity, did not see the early signs. What should have been the calm beginning of a lifelong partnership was already shifting, almost invisibly, toward tension. Success came faster than Solomon expected. Within a year, he received a significant promotion at Raymond Global Logistics. His salary increased, his office grew larger, and his access to executives expanded. Invitations to corporate dinners followed, where polished conversations revolved around influence, investments, and elite social circles. For the first time, Solomon felt close to the powerful world he had always envied. And with that proximity came comparison. At one executive dinner, he observed the wives of senior managers, elegant, refined, confident in elite environments. They spoke about charity boards, private schools, and international travel. When Daniela joined him at similar events, dressed simply and speaking thoughtfully rather than boastfully, Solomon felt something unfamiliar, embarrassment. Not because she lacked intelligence, she often outshined others quietly, but because she did not project wealth. She did not perform status. To him, appearance was beginning to matter more than substance. The shift was subtle at first. He suggested she upgrade her wardrobe. He hinted that her father seemed too quiet at social gatherings. He joked about how one day he would move them into a house worthy of his growing position. Daniela heard the humor but sensed the sharpness beneath it. Pascal observed the change without comment, trusting that character reveals itself when tested by success. What Solomon did not realize was that every small remark was slowly widening a fracture in his marriage, a crack formed not by poverty, but by pride. Anita Frank arrived at Raymond Global Logistics with the kind of presence that redirected attention without effort. Confident, stylish, and sharply perceptive, she understood corporate dynamics almost instantly. Anita believed his success favored those bold enough to take it, and she treated the workplace like a chessboard. When she met Solomon during a strategy meeting, she recognized ambition in him immediately, the restless energy of someone eager to climb higher, faster. Their conversations began professionally but soon stretched beyond necessity. Anita praised his work openly, admired his rise, and spoke often about the importance of being seen with the right people. She introduced him to exclusive networking gatherings and encouraged him to think beyond his current circle. Around her, Solomon felt validated in a way that stroked his growing appetite for recognition. Anita never criticized Daniela directly, yet her carefully chosen remarks made simplicity sound like limitation. Gradually, Solomon started staying out later, explaining that visibility mattered for advancement. Anita's world glittered with possibility, upscale lounges, influential contacts, and conversations about power. Compared to that atmosphere, his quiet home began to feel smaller in his eyes. Daniela noticed the distance forming, but chose patience over confrontation, believing marriages moved through seasons. What she could not see was how deliberately Anita nurtured Solomon's dissatisfaction, watering the very pride that would soon eclipse his judgment. Solomon's transformation became impossible to ignore. He replaced practical furniture with expensive pieces Daniela never asked for, insisting their home must reflect his new level. He began correcting how she dressed before events, and discouraged her from mentioning her modest upbringing in conversations. What once sounded like suggestions hardened into expectations. Daniela remained calm, but the warmth between them started thinning, replaced by careful silence. Evenings changed. Solomon often returned late, carrying the scent of unfamiliar places and speaking enthusiastically about people Daniela had never met. When she asked gentle questions, his answers were brief, distracted. He started describing her father as comfortable with too little, questioning why Pascal never appeared ambitious. The words stung more than Daniela showed. She had always admired her father's quiet strength, yet Solomon interpreted restraint as weakness. One night, during a small disagreement about attending another corporate function, Solomon spoke with unusual sharpness. "If I'm going to keep rising, I can't look surrounded by people who don't match where I'm headed." The room fell still after the sentence escaped him. Daniela did not argue. She simply absorbed the weight behind it. Respect, once natural between them, was slowly being replaced by evaluation. And though Solomon saw himself as evolving, he failed to recognize the cost. He was no longer building a life with Daniela. He was measuring her against one. Pascal noticed the change long before anyone mentioned it. Years of leading a global empire had sharpened his ability to read people with unsettling accuracy. During a quiet dinner at Daniela's home, he observed Solomon speaking more about influence than purpose, more about perception than integrity. Solomon barely concealed his impatience when conversations drifted toward simple pleasures rather than strategic advantage. Pascal said little, but his silence carried evaluation. Margaret Hale, Pascal's trusted executive assistant who alone knew his hidden identity inside the company, also reported subtle concerns. Solomon's performance remained strong, yet his behavior had shifted. He gravitated toward visibility, aligned himself with socially powerful colleagues, and appeared increasingly closed to Anita Frank. None of these actions were misconduct, but together they suggested a man whose priorities were recalibrating around status. Later that evening, Pascal walked Daniela to her door. His voice was calm but deliberate. "Power does not change people," he said quietly. "It reveals them." Daniela understood the warning yet chose hope. She believed marriages survived growing pains and that love could steady ambition before it hardened into arrogance. Pascal did not challenge her optimism. He simply prepared himself to act if dignity were ever threatened. What none of them knew was that an upcoming corporate Thanksgiving gala would soon accelerate everything, turning quiet warning signs into a moment no one could undo. News of the annual Thanksgiving gala spread quickly through Raymond Global Logistics. It was the company's most anticipated event, an evening known for elegance, high-profile guests, and career-defining visibility. Executives, partners, and rising talents would gather under one glittering roof. For Solomon, the invitation felt less like attendance and more like arrival. He saw the gala as proof that he was no longer the struggling man he once feared becoming again. Preparation consumed him. He ordered an expensive custom suit, upgraded his watch, and rehearsed conversations he imagined having with senior leadership. Anita encouraged every step, helping him refine his image and reminding him that perception often opened doors faster than competence alone. When Daniela mentioned wearing one of her simple dresses, Solomon hesitated before suggesting she choose something more fitting for the room. Though he framed it gently, the implication lingered. She was becoming a detail he wanted carefully managed. Daniela agreed without protest, valuing harmony over pride. Pascal also confirmed his attendance, presenting it as a rare appearance at one of the company's public functions. Beneath his calm exterior, he intended only to observe. As the evening approached, anticipation grew in different ways. Solomon saw triumph ahead, Anita sensed opportunity, Daniela hoped for reconnection, and Pascal prepared to witness character without interference. None of them realized the gala would not merely reveal success, it would expose truth with a force that would permanently alter all their lives. On the evening of the gala, the ballroom shimmered with quiet grandeur. Crystal lights reflected across polished floors, while conversations blended into a soft hum of influence and ambition. Solomon entered with controlled confidence, Anita beside him, guiding introductions with effortless charm. When Daniela and Pascal arrived moments later, their understated appearance contrasted sharply with the room's extravagance. Some guests barely noticed them, exactly as Pascal preferred. Compliments flowed toward Solomon, each one strengthening the image he had built. Anita leaned close throughout the evening, subtly reinforcing his importance. "Tonight is about positioning," she whispered once. "People remember bold men." Her words settled deep. By the time discussions turned toward speeches from emerging leaders, Solomon felt an intoxicating certainty that this was his moment to redefine how the company, and the world, saw him. Across the room, Daniela watched her husband laugh freely with Anita, sensing a distance she could no longer explain away. Pascal observed something else entirely, a dangerous inflation of ego that often arrived just before a fall. Pride had a rhythm he recognized well, first satisfaction, then superiority, then disregard. As Solomon accepted the invitation to address the gathering later that night, he believed he was stepping into recognition. In truth, he was walking toward a decision that would fracture his life in a single, irreversible instant. When Solomon stepped forward to address the gathering, the room quieted in anticipation. His voice began steady, confident, thanking leadership for opportunity and growth. Applause followed his opening remarks, and he felt the validation surge through him. As he continued, his tone shifted from gratitude to assertion. He spoke about ambition, about refusing to remain small, about breaking free from limitations. Anita watched approvingly from her seat, her expression urging him forward. Then his words sharpened. He referenced humble beginnings and spoke about outgrowing environments that drag progress backward. Laughter from a few guests encouraged him further. His gaze drifted toward Daniela and Pascal. With reckless boldness, he described how some people choose comfort in mediocrity, calling such mindsets wretched and incapable of rising. The word echoed heavier than he intended. The room stiffened. Yet he did not stop. In a moment fueled by arrogance, he lifted his glass, mocked the simplicity of those who cling to small lives, and carelessly let the drink spill forward, splashing onto Daniela and Pascal's clothing. Silence replaced applause instantly. Daniela did not move. Her dignity held firmer than her shock. Pascal stood slowly, adjusting his jacket without visible anger. Anita's smile faded as she sensed the shift in the room's energy. What Solomon mistook for dominance was, in truth, exposure. He had not merely insulted his wife and her father, he had revealed the core of his character in front of the very people who controlled his future. And as Pascal calmly began walking toward the front, the atmosphere transformed from celebration to reckoning. A stillness settled over the ballroom so completely that even the faint clink of glassware seemed intrusive. Conversations died mid-breath. Solomon remained where he stood, initially mistaking the silence for stunned admiration rather than alarm. Daniela gently set her glass aside, her composure unbroken despite the liquid staining her sleeve. She did not wipe it away immediately. Dignity required no hurried reaction. Pascal moved forward with measured calm, neither rushed nor theatrical. His expression carried no visible anger, only clarity. Those who recognized him subtly straightened, while others sensed authority without understanding why. Margaret Hale stepped slightly closer, prepared but unobtrusive. Anita, reading the room with practiced instinct, felt unease replace her earlier confidence. Something irreversible was unfolding. Solomon's certainty began to flicker. The approving energy he had fed on moments earlier had vanished, replaced by watchful restraint. He glanced toward Anita, but even she offered no reassuring signal now. As Pascal reached the front, the quiet deepened rather than broke. It was the kind of silence that arrives just before truth is spoken, heavy, unavoidable, and impossible to reverse. Solomon finally felt it then, a faint but rising awareness that the moment he believed crowned his ascent might instead mark the edge of the fall. Pascal accepted the microphone with steady hands, his presence commanding attention without effort. When he spoke, his voice was calm, refined, and unmistakably authoritative. He introduced himself not with anger, but with fact. Pascal Raymond, founder and chief executive officer of Raymond Global Logistics. The words landed with quiet force, spreading shock across the room in widening waves. Executives lowered their heads respectfully. Some guests froze entirely. The hidden leader they had rarely seen was standing before them. Solomon's expression emptied. At first, he seemed not to understand what he had heard. His mouth parted slightly, eyes fixed on Pascal as fragments of memory rearranged themselves, the modest apartment, the quiet demeanor, the unexplained opportunities. Realization struck with brutal clarity. He had not insulted ordinary people. He had humiliated the very architect of his success, and the daughter of the man who owned his future. Pascal did not raise his voice. He simply spoke about dignity, character, and the responsibility that comes with advancement. Then came the decision, delivered without hesitation. Solomon Barnes was terminated effective immediately. Security was instructed to handle the formalities discreetly. No anger, no spectacle, just consequence. Daniela stepped forward then, placing a sealed envelope into Solomon's unsteady hands. Divorce papers. Her eyes held sadness, but no uncertainty. Words failed him. Even apology felt too small for the damage done. Around them, the gala remained suspended in stunned silence as the life Solomon had built collapsed in a single, unforgiving moment. By the time Solomon found his voice again, the room had already begun shifting away from him, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet distance people create when reputations fracture. He turned instinctively toward Anita, searching for the familiar reassurance that had fueled his confidence all evening. But her chair was empty. Panic nudged his chest as he scanned the ballroom. Just minutes earlier she had stood proudly beside him. Now there was no trace of her. No farewell, no defense, no attempt to soften the disaster. Anita understood power better than attachment, and the moment Solomon lost his, she adjusted accordingly. Remaining near him offered no advantage, only association with disgrace. The realization settled heavily. The alliance he mistook for loyalty had always been conditional. Messages he sent went unanswered. Calls rang without response. In a single evening, admiration had evaporated into absence. Solomon stood alone, the echo of his arrogance louder now than the murmurs around him. For the first time in years, the future he had tried so hard to control looked uncertain and frighteningly empty. Outside the ballroom, the night air felt colder than it should have. Daniela stepped out briefly, needing distance from the weight of the evening. Solomon followed, the sealed envelope still trembling in his grip. Street lights cast long shadows between them, emphasizing the emotional space that had grown far wider than the pavement beneath their feet. "I never knew," he managed to say, his voice stripped of the confidence it once carried. Daniela met his gaze calmly. "You never asked. You only measured what you believed we were worth." There was no anger in her tone, only clarity. She explained that wealth had never been the test. Character was. And tonight, he had answered that test publicly. Solomon tried to speak again, but regret tangled his thoughts. The divorce papers were not an act of revenge. They were protection, a boundary drawn after respect had been broken beyond repair. Daniela wished him no harm, yet she refused to remain where dignity could be discarded so easily. When she turned to leave, her steps were steady, carrying her not away from loss, but toward self-respect. The days that followed moved with ruthless efficiency. company access revoked, professional contacts withdrawn, invitations disappeared. News of the gala traveled quickly through corporate circles, and though details were shared discreetly, the conclusion was universal: Solomon had destroyed his own ascent. At home, the silence pressed in. The expensive furniture he once believed signaled success now felt hollow, like props from a life that no longer existed. His parents called with concern, but even their voices carried confusion rather than comfort. How could everything unravel so quickly? Solomon asked himself the same question, though deep down he knew the answer had begun forming long before that night. Sleep became difficult. Pride replayed its mistakes without mercy. He recognized, with painful clarity, how often Daniela had chosen patience when he offered criticism, how frequently Pascal had shown restraint when he deserved respect. Loss stripped away illusion, leaving only truth. Success without humility had never been strength at all. While Solomon faced the consequences of his choices, Daniela stepped quietly into a new chapter. She joined Pascal more closely within the company, not as an heir demanding authority, but as a leader shaped by observation and empathy. Employees soon discovered that her calm intelligence carried both firmness and fairness. Pascal watched with quiet pride as she navigated decisions thoughtfully, balancing strategy with humanity. Where others led through pressure, Daniela inspired through respect. Her experience living simply had taught her what policies looked like from every level of an organization, knowledge no textbook could provide. Though the wound of betrayal had not vanished entirely, it no longer defined her. Strength replaced heartbreak, and purpose replaced disappointment. She understood now that authenticity must be protected, not merely offered. The future ahead felt open again, not because the past was forgotten, but because it had refined her. Spring arrived gently, carrying the sense of renewal that follows even the harshest winters. Daniela stood near the wide office windows one morning, sunlight stretching across the city her father had quietly helped shape. Peace felt unfamiliar at first, yet deeply deserved. Pascal joined her, saying only, "Endings often clear the path for better beginnings." She smiled, knowing he was right. Life had not hardened her. It had clarified her values. Wherever love found her again, it would stand on mutual respect, never assumption. Elsewhere, Solomon walked a far humbler road, forever marked by a lesson learned too late. Dignity once shattered cannot be reclaimed by regret alone. And so the world continued forward, one life rebuilt through wisdom, another reshaped by consequence, proving that character, above all else, determines the direction of every new beginning. As this story comes to an end, remember that behind every luxury lies a truth few ever see. If this story moved you, support the channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Until the next unforgettable true story, stay inspired and stay curious.